Now, when you get set up to start using the watercolors, okay, you'll need the things that I sort of described during class. So you'll need your two plastic containers. Again, I've just got like these yogurt containers, and I have the lids as well. If you have a container this is 32 ounce, so if you have one that's 16 ounce or like an 8-ounce container, those are a little bit better. These tend to be a little bit tall, but they're okay. And notice that I've sort of filled these up about halfway with water. You don't want more than halfway. You want two of these because one of them is going to be for rinsing out your brush to when you change colors, and the other one is going to be for getting the water and actually activating the paint, because this is actually, it's dry as it sort of starts, and these are kind of called sort of moist oval pans versus sort of the really dry. So these do tend to get sticky after they sort of get wet. Another thing to have on hand is a scratch piece of paper, so you can just use this paper that I put inside of your sketchbooks as well. You've got about 15 or so sheets of that, so you want to have that on hand as well, just to kind of do some testing, and also to sort of get a little bit of extra color off of your brush kind of as you need to do it. So I've got my two containers, my two lids for when I mix my colors, because you don't have the luxury of having the little palettes with the little round circles in them that have the nice little contained areas for paint. So we kind of have to mix a little bit of paint on these and then clear it off, wipe it off, and then mix a little bit more, and so on. You can actually mix the paint in the lid, because that's what these little trays are for. So you're welcome to do that. However, if you do that, it's really, really important that you take like a paper towel or a little cloth or something that's like a rag, like a dirty rag, that's okay if it gets stained, and really wipe these things out and really dry these things sort of out each day after you're finished painting. Because of course what will happen is if you go, oh, I'm all done, these are all wet, I close this up, it's going to drip in here and it's going to mess up your colors, and then you're going to say, oh man, I have to clean these out. And when you clean them, a lot of times you end up wasting a lot of the pigment, a lot of the paint in these little pans. Okay, so you are welcome to mix the colors in here. That's kind of what it's for, but remember, you have to dry it out and really clean it out after every painting session. I've also got some paper towels over here, so I'll sort of just tear like one little paper towel. You don't need a whole lot of paper towels, just a little bit in case you make a mistake, or to dry your brush off, because you don't want to have your brush, you don't want your brush to be totally sopping wet every single time. Okay, now it comes with your brush. Mine's having a little difficulty coming out. Okay, so it came with this little protective thing. You don't need to keep this. You can just toss this if you want. If you really like it and you want to keep it on there and put it on the tip of your brush every single time, that's totally fine as well. When you first get the brush out, it'll be a little stiff, so you kind of have to kind of flick it back and forth, make sure the bristles are no longer sort of sticking together. Now with the oval pans here, because some of these you can get that are square, all right, we've got lots of different colors. Okay, so you have lots of options sort of this time around. A little bit later on, we're going to be creating color wheels where we're just going to be using the primaries, which are the red, the yellow, and the blue. Okay, we'll sort of leave these other things for a little bit later. Okay, but if you sort of open it up and you touch it a little bit, it's slightly sticky. Okay, so this is a little bit sticky on here. So we kind of have to watch that as we go, because what will happen is you get this wet, and as it dries, it'll become very, very sticky. And so if you don't want to, you know, stick your finger in there, you're going to waste a lot of the paint, or you don't want this like leaking on something else. And another thing to be careful of is when you are painting, when you start painting your paintings, is to not get too much of a thick amount of paint on your paintings, because it'll be tacky and sticky sort of all the time. We don't want that. These are watercolors. We're going to have very watered down pigments in here. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of washes being created with the water. All right, so taking care of your materials. So I sort of give in the first part, I sort of talked a little bit about the introduction to these things. Again, that you could use these areas in here as palettes. Okay, but now is the time for cleanup. Now, normally in cleanup in a class, there'll be people that do sort of jobs for like the entire class, but it's all up to you. So if you don't want a messed up bunch of paint sets here, if you don't want these colors all messed up, then you've got to do a few things to be sort of make sure that that doesn't happen. First off, if your areas in your palette look like this, well, guess what? You've got to clean it up. So you can take your paper towel and you want to clean this off really well. And then you can come back into your water and dip a little bit in the water and really get that really clean. And you also want it dry. So you want that as dry as you can. All right. So I've dried all of this off. So that's as clean as I can get it. It looks pretty good. Okay. Now, the brush. Okay. So you want to make sure that it's really thoroughly cleaned out in the water. And then I'm going to dry it off like so. So it has this nice point. And if you want to put the little cap back on it, that's totally fine. That's optional. I'll go ahead and put mine on there. But sometimes if you're not careful, you'll get the little bristles out of whack. Okay, so I can just put mine right there. Now, if this got all painty and goopy, these just kind of pop out. So you can pop these things out. Okay, so pop these both out. And get your towel and your cloth. Having a little hard time popping mine out. I don't want it like in and up on my shirt. There we go. Okay, and then see, I've got in here, we don't want a whole bunch of paint in here. So what'll happen with kids is that if you don't dry this out, you'll just do this, and then of course all the water and all the paint and all the colors gets on these, which messes these up. But also, this becomes a nasty sticky mess in here, and you stick your brush in between, and then your brush gets all gross and gnarly, and it gets stuck to this thing. So we don't want that. We want these as nice as the way we found it. Okay, and this just kind of pops back in there, slides over. Again, that just kind of pops in there, slides over. That's nice and dry. I can stick my brush in here. Now I think, oh, I'm just going to close it up. No, don't close that up. Okay, you don't want to close this up because you want this to air out a little bit. All right. So, you know, leave this in a spot where people aren't going to mess with it. Your cat's not going to walk on it. You know, your dog's not going to lick through it or whatever. You know, maybe up high on like a bookshelf so that it, you know, can get nice and dried out for the next day. Okay, because what will happen is even if you've cleaned this really well and you haven't flipped it upside down or anything, and you come to the next day, these are going to be really moist and really wet. And it's going to tempt you to just take your brush and really dig in and just use a whole bunch of these pigments, which we don't want. We want to use like hardly any, just little bits, okay? Because this is, you know, basically when we're done with these this semester, you know, the next person's going to get these, and you know they should be pretty much as full as you got them in the first place, okay? So let them dry out so that they're that kind of hard, kind of slightly, barely tacky kind of substance. So they might not dry out 100%, but you know, again, if you keep them in this state, they're going to stay wet, and you're going to be tempted to really dig in there to that paint, and we don't want you to waste the paint.